Welcome back, and thank you for joining me. It's Bible Scribe. I'm glad to be back with you. After my recent video called Satan's Little Season, My Perspective, the video created some interest, and I'm excited for that. You know, a lot of people caught on to that online and took a look, getting a lot of good responses from people. But you know, as I stated in that video, I was doing my best to go over this very large concept, the very deep and broad justification for the viewpoint that I take. And I think I did a very good job of it in that video, but there's no way anyone can do that kind of a thing and not, you know, you can't answer everyone's questions all at once. Okay, everyone's going to come from a different perspective. They're going to see different things they want to ask about. And as I was going through the comments, trying to keep up with the more important ones I wanted people to know the answers to that I give, I felt it was important to make this follow-up video so that essentially people don't have to dig through comments to see the answers to these things I think might be common questions about my viewpoint and about the scriptures in general. So there's a number of questions that came up in the comments after that video. That's what this video is about. I won't take too much of your time, but I wanted to at least answer some of these more common questions. So I'll start by putting some of these on the screen for you so you can see the question that's been asked. So here we go. Here's the first of the questions. Let me make it just a bit bigger if I can here. Let's see. Ooh. Sorry about that. You know, you try to do a lot of things at once. Sometimes it doesn't go as smooth as you'd hope. All right. So the first question that I wanted to answer on this is someone asked, cite where the 7,000 years are given for the duration of Earth or Earth's history, because that's a major part of the viewpoint that I shared in the video, that there's 7,000 years allotted for human history, with an 8,000 years, that's an age that is dedicated to the shifting of humanity from physical to spiritual, and the turning inflection point of that being the Great White Throne Judgment. So that being said, yes, the 7,000 years, I do have a number of resources that mention the 7,000. So I'm going to put them here on the screen, and I'm going to ask that if you're interested in doing this, that you screen cap this, because I'm not going to read through all these, obviously. So let me make that bigger so you can see it pretty well. Okay. So I'm going to ask that if you want to study this further, that you screen cap this and you go look at these different sources that I have referenced. The first section there is references that are very direct. They literally say there's 7,000 years allotted for history, or there's 6,000 for this and then a 7,000. So they are very direct. Now the bottom half of this list here, those are going to be not what I would say not as direct, but they play into the same concept. Generally, most of them will be saying that there are 6,000 years, and then it would be talking about the judgment or something like that. Because again, as I said in the video, some of these early church writers were also striving to understand the book of Revelation fully and how that applied to the past prophecies in the Old Testament, how it all fit together. So they were still trying to put some of the puzzle pieces together. But in general, there was a huge consensus on this idea of the day ages of the earth being set by God according to the book of Genesis, according to the 7 days of creation, and that was the time allotted for Earth, a 7,000 year period. And all of these seem to agree. So again, I've asked you if you will just pause it and then screen cap or try to read all these. Let me see. Oh, I got to get out of the way. There we go. Hippolytus. You'll miss Hippolytus's extant works and fragments if I don't move out of the way there. Okay, so that's the list. Screen cap it, pause it, go back, and then, you know, get the list. It's also in the comments of that original video if you want to go dig there. All right, so that's the first question. So let's move on then to the second question that I want to address today. Now this one is one I actually get a lot, and it's not just about the Satan's Little Season, but this is one that I get personally a lot because I do study heavily the early church fathers' writings, the early church writings, not just the ones that are called the fathers, but all of the early church writings. Okay, there's a lot of them. So the question about trust is interesting, and this person said specifically, the writings were translated. Essentially, he's kind of blanket stating that all the writings, the early church writings, were translated by a couple guys in the late 1800s. And further on in his comment, he mentions Westcott and Hort. Okay, so I will tell you that in just 5 minutes of research online. Okay, and I wasn't 100%, I was pretty sure he was wrong, but I wanted to take time so that I did my due diligence. I would expect nothing less from you guys. If you come to me with, statements about validity of something or without backing it up, then you force me to do the work, which is really unfair, but I like it. I'm good at it. So I'll do the work. I spent 5 to 10 minutes on this, and I found out that Westcott and Hort did all their work in the late 1800s, okay? The problem with that having anything to do with the translation or the work on all these ancient manuscripts is that when we look at each of the church fathers, we see that they have manuscript evidence from centuries before that. Okay, Westcott and Hort had nothing to do with the early church writings. Maybe they did do some translations of it. They're actually known for their translations of the New Testament. And it's in Greek, not in English. So to say that they are responsible for the translation of the early church fathers' works I think it's downright wrong. I dug in on Justin Martyr. I looked at Justin Martyr. His writing on the resurrection is from a manuscript called the Sacra Parallela from the 10th century. Okay, so that is the 10th century, but it's not the 8th or 19th century when Westcott and Hort were messing around. Okay, and then the dialogue with Trypho that Justin Martyr is so well known for, that I like to reference a lot, was discovered in 1364 in a manuscript called the Graecus 450. Okay, a manuscript. So to say that Westcott and Hort had anything to do with the translation of those is patently false. We'll go on to Irenaeus. His Against Heresies was found in a fragment of a papyrus in Greek called the Papyrus Oxyrhynchus 405. You can look it up on the internet if you want to. It was discovered in 1904, but the manuscript the paper it's on was dated to the time Irenaeus was alive, 200 AD. Okay, so in the case of Irenaeus, the church father, is one of the most well-known early church fathers that I study a lot, and some of his material was in the video I did on Satan's Little Season. The manuscripts that hold some of his writings are from the 2nd century, early 3rd, if you want to consider 200 the 3rd century. Then there's other subsequent copies of that particular writing that were found in the 9th and 10th century, and then again in the Vatican in the 11th and 12th century. And guess what? They matched. So again, we have really good supporting evidence for these writings. It's not like they're obscured from history and we just don't know anything about them. There are other writings of Irenaeus, the demonstration of the apostolic preaching that is from the manuscript called Erevin Matinadaron 214 from the 13th century. Okay, long time ago. His letter to Victor is quoted by Eusebius in the 4th century, so that's a 4th century reference to his work. Again, there's another point to be made about this, that the early church fathers reference each other, so they oftentimes build the authoritativeness of each other because they use each other as references as they go along, in addition to the New Testament. That's something actually that if you don't read the early church fathers, you wouldn't know, but they quote the New Testament, very heavily. make use heavily of quotes. In fact, I was trying to think of which one it was. One of these guys I was reading the other day, I was almost annoyed because almost every sentence he was writing was straight out of the New Testament. And I was like, when is he going to talk? So anyway, just to say that these are very well cross-referenced. I pushed into the Epistle of Barnabas. We have in the Codex Sinaiticus, we have a copy of the Epistle of Barnabas. That is dated to the 4th century, 330 AD. Now, if you think Westcott and Hort had anything to do with that manuscript, I'm sorry, you're wrong. And I've gone into some of these manuscripts on my live streams and on my videos. Sometimes I will pull up Codex Sinaiticus and I will show you the Greek words. Because I've done that in some of these key passages. I want to know, does it match what we have now? Has someone changed it since 330 AD? And in all my work in that, I have found almost no differential between the oldest manuscripts I can find in most of these writings and our current modern manuscripts, granted in the Greek, in the original language, okay? They have been mostly preserved. But the Epistle of Barnabas also shows up in another codex called Codex Hierosolymatinus of the 11th century. And there's a Latin version we see pop up in the 9th century. Another papyrus called Michigan 175 from the 4th century AD. And then there are 9 other Greek manuscripts of the Epistle of Barnabas from the 11th to the 16th century. Now that's pretty good coverage. If you're trying to make a case that, that this is, been made up or been obscured or been changed, you're going to have a hard time proving that if you take all these 5 different testimonies from different time periods, you compare them, and they all say the same thing. I'm sorry, you're going to have a hard time proving that they've been corrupted over the time periods, okay? And then the last one I looked up because I started to get bored looking these guys up and proving that they were very reliable witnesses. Tertullian, his writing, his apology, is referenced in the Codex Fuldensis in 850 AD. So that's obviously a very long time ago. His other writing called On the Resurrection of the Flesh, which is one I like to read. I've enjoyed getting to know that writing because the resurrection is such an important topic for Christians. Again, in 850 AD, that same codex, it contains that as well. And we have other manuscripts from the 9th century for his writing against Marcion, which the Trinitarians claim is the basis of their beliefs. And then On the Prescription of Heretics, another one from the 9th century. So again, we have very good evidence for these guys. As I started looking into these and considering this question about, I don't trust these guys. The writings were translated by a couple of guys in the late 1800s. That's just not true. There are many translators that have translated these works. Many. In fact, I think I stated in the comment in response to this that my favorite translator that I have relied on over the years is James H. Charlesworth. Now, that's not to say he's the only one that I've relied on, but I've not only read his translations of some of these works, but I've read a couple of his books. And I've found his methods of study and research to be impeccable. He's a very good researcher, and I just really like his perspective. Not to say I think he's right on everything, but his credentials are second to none. Okay, James Charlesworth. But Westcott and Hort, I don't know and haven't seen any translations of theirs of any of these works that I've ever read. So just to say. Now, the next question that I got and I do want to address tonight in this video is someone claiming in the comments that most of the claimed works of ancient historians and chronologists that we are told existed and had written works comes from mainstream sources we should not be trusting, such as the Vatican or Jesuits or Freemasons. Now, because of the broad nature of this statement, like I can't just, you can throw something like that out, again, with no references, and you're not really doing anyone any favors. So, again, you've put the work on me, thank you very much, to check every writing that I've ever read against the Vatican or against the Jesuits or against the Freemasons. I don't have that kind of time. But because, I do trust some scholarship in the world of Christian writings, and the majority scholarship over the centuries, not just modern scholarship, but over the centuries has been that this is not true. So what I did was I did my due diligence as best I could. And again, I would encourage you guys, if you're going to make broad sweeping statements like this, do your due diligence. And I went to Grok, because AI is good at compiling lots of information from different sources. So here's what I asked Grok. I think I can just show it to you. Let's see. I did some of my research here. Let's put this on the screen. Yeah, okay, here we go. So, make it bigger for you guys once I get down here to it. Let's see. All right, here's the question I asked Grok. Well, it keeps moving on me. Here we go. Do many or any, and I kind of focused, and I realize now that the question was asked about specifically, what'd you say, historians and chronologists? So maybe there's a further step that can be done here. I first asked it, do any or many of the early Christian writings come from the Vatican or Jesuits or Freemasons, etc., and can they be trusted? Now, again, just to reiterate, I work in this field, so I know what AI does, and I know how it works under the covers. It aggregates data from a massive amount of sources, okay? And so that's what Grok did here. You can see it actually, I was surprised. It says it worked on this problem for 28 seconds. You can see it examined a bunch of things, and as it was going through these different questions, looking online, it couldn't find answers to support that. It says here, no evidence found, no evidence. It couldn't find blah, blah, blah. So after 30 seconds of looking through all of its resources, it comes back and says, in general, that manuscripts were produced by early Christian scribes. Of the early Christian writings is what we're talking about really here. In places like Alexandria, Antioch, Rome. When I was mentioning to you a minute ago, papyrus number, whatever, 105, Oxyrhynchus, and all these different papyri, they're from these places. Alexandria, Antioch, Rome, Palestine, different areas. That all these different papyrus collections come from all over the place, okay? It says that preservation involved the monasteries, okay? So it was the Christians preserving their own work is what you saw. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think I've read some stuff about that. These writings really didn't travel a lot. They didn't take the writings and send them places. They usually stayed where they were delivered to, where they were written, or if they were letters, epistles, wherever they were written to, and they stayed there. They were held in sacred keeping at the churches or the monasteries. So that's why they found Codex Sinaiticus in St. Catherine's Monastery, because that's where it had been all that time, 4th century. All right, but then to continue, it says, none of the works, none. Now, this is it searching like as much of the internet as Grok can find on this. None trace their creation to the Vatican or Jesuits or Freemasons. Now, in a second, just live here, because I forgot to do it, I'm going to go ahead and hit this against historians and chronologists and tell Grok to tell me which historians and chronologists were Vatican, Jesuits, or Freemasons, and it'll tell us. So just hang on a second. But it just continues, and it goes on and on. I won't read all of this to you, but it says, can they be trusted? Yes. The early Christian writings based on scholarly consensus. Early Christian writings are among the most reliable ancient texts. Now, it is talking about the New Testament, but it's also talking about not the New Testament, other Christian writings, the early church fathers. Okay. Manuscript evidence, external corroboration, the scholarly view. You know, consensus is worth something. It's not everything, right? Consensus can be wrong, but they're externally corroborated by even non-Christian sources. And so, you know, it just, in general, Grok's overall on all of this was that there's just no connection. No early writings originate or were forged by the Vatican, Jesuits, or Freemasons. Now, because I didn't ask about historians and chronologists, what about, I'll just type it in here. Let me move it up for you so you see. What about historians and chronologists? Let's just find out what it says. Clear, evidence-based answer to the common claim that historians and chronologists deliberately falsified the early Christian timeline, invented centuries, or hid missing years to deceive people. Well, this is good because, see, Grok is aware of the different theories that are out in the internet. You know, one of the sources for Grok is X itself. So everything that anyone's posting on X, it is evaluating all the time. Short answer. No credible historian or chronologist has ever found evidence that centuries were invented, removed, or that the early Christian writings were backdated or manipulated on any large scale. As it says, and as I would say, I've said this to people before, the timeline we use today, AD, has some minor inaccuracies and gaps. Grok here suggests a few years around when Jesus was actually born. I know that when the Catholic Church switched everyone to the Gregorian calendar, it shifted some things, but from what I understand, it was only a few months worth of shift. You know, and so anyway, to continue, this is talking about different places where there's possibilities for chronology corrections or problems. Jesuit chronologists, there were a couple, Denis Patau or Dionysius Patavius. Okay, that's a 17th century Jesuit scholar. I've never studied this guy. I don't know what he says. I've never studied Dionysius Patavius chronology. Never studied it. Now, I have studied Isaac Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, and someone in the comments asked me, well, what about Isaac Newton? We know he was a Freemason. What do you have to say about that? Shouldn't we just get rid of all his work? And I said to the person, well, I have read both Isaac Newton's chronology, and I have also read his writings about the book of Revelation and the New Testament, some of that stuff. And I told this person, look, you know, he was alive in, I believe it was the 14th or 15th century. And that's way before the Illuminati invaded Freemasonry. Now, I'm not a proponent of Freemasonry at all. Trust me. You don't have to worry about that. But when we look at Freemasonry from like the 14th century, it's a heck of a lot different than it is in the 17th and 18th century. Okay. A totally different animal. And I told this person also that in my reading of Sir Isaac Newton's writings, I could tell he was a faithful Christian. Okay, I'll just say that much. Regardless of his other interests, he definitely believed in Christ and God. I can't claim to all aspects of his faith, but he obviously was a believer in some regard. So I'll just leave it at that. We've got, this mentions in Grok Anatoly Fomenko with the new chronology he came up with. He was a Russian mathematician. I've gone over Fomenko's work before. I have not read his book. Okay, I've not read his book. But he is, I know you know this, I know this, he's universally rejected by historians and archaeologists, etc. There's almost no one that agrees with him in the world of scholarship, right? There's only a few, very few. I did some research on Fomenko a while back. He's a very strange individual. Like, he used to do art, and some of his art, if you look it up, I hate to say it looks quite satanic, and I'm not kidding. Maybe I can show this to you real quick, because I think it bears mentioning. So let me get to it briefly. Anatoly Fomenko's artwork. Here is some of his art. Now, pictures like this, I mean, this is there. I have like 60 pictures of his. Very weird stuff, kind of like Salvador Dali-ish. This kind of thing. Kind of looks like Saturn, if you will. I don't know for sure if that's what the representation is. Just some weird stuff. He's a mathematician. Some of it's mathematical, but, you know, kind of MC Escher-ish stuff. Trying to find, yeah, some of this is a little strange. This kind of looks like hell. I mean, it just, to me it does. I don't know about you. It's got these bats or something flying out of this weird mountain. Looks like fire. Not sure what that means. Just some really weird looking pictures. Yeah, so I'm just saying, Fomenko seems like a bit of a strange guy. I don't have time to go through all of these strange, weird pictures, but just to say that I got a real bad taste in my mouth for Fomenko after studying some of this stuff. I really did. And I would encourage you, you know, to just be careful with this stuff like this. This doesn't give me good feelings to look at this artwork. I'm just saying, that's totally like opinionated on my part. I'm just saying, be careful of some of this stuff. He looks a little strange to me. There's a ton of artwork of his, so I won't go through any more of that. Just to say, I don't have a lot of faith in Anatoly Fomenko and his new chronology. So Grok mentions hard evidence that the timeline is real. He mentions tree ring dating, which dendrochronology I have some faith in, but not a lot, because tree rings do different things based on the type of year in the weather that occurs. So if you get multiple freezes during a year, you get multiple rings, and the scholars will tell you this if you dig in on them. And some of their skeptics will tell you this, of course, because they're like, no, it's not accurate. It's not exactly accurate. But, you know, they tend to do this tree ring thing. It's probably accurate enough to tell if 1,000 years are gone out of our history. So that's something. Ice cores, I don't know. That's, again, it's like, how much do you trust some of these things? Egyptian, Babylonian, Mayan calendars, they synchronize with AD and BC timeline via lunar and solar eclipses. That's interesting. I haven't even checked into that. The Roman officials from 300 BC onward is a year-by-year list, and it's confirmed by inscriptions and coins in the Roman Empire. So apparently, you know, doing this, going year by year and using the Roman official lists from Rome from 300 BC forward to now, you can get a contiguous chronology of Rome, okay? And of course, you know, a lot of people will say, well, Rome and the Vatican, they're the ones that changed everything on us. Well, if you believe that the Roman Empire was that cohesive and coordinated, I would just encourage you to take stock of the people that ruled Rome from about 600 AD to 1300 AD. They didn't even have their heads on straight. They were mostly just using the Capitoline city as a brothel and having orgies. I mean, it was ridiculous what the Roman officials were doing during those time periods. So radiocarbon archaeological layers, I you know, that to me is, again, a little suspect. But I think that one thing Grok left out here, is just in general historical writings, okay? So I'm going to force it. Can you please list historians that are related to the Vatican Jesuits or Freemasons, and list those that are not. And chronologists, right? You know, we're going to do this right. If we're going to do this, we're going to really know before we answer questions. That's what I like to do. Do our best, at least. Let's see. Historians and chronologists with real ties to the Vatican or Jesuits. Dionysius Exiguus in 544. I've never read his stuff. Venerable Bede. I've run across his stuff, but it says that he has no Vatican or Jesuit linkages. Okay, none. Dionysius Patau or Dionysius Patavius, which we mentioned before, is a Jesuit. His work is respected by secular scholars. I've never read his work. Okay, so I don't know what to say about that. Jean Hardouin, a Jesuit priest from the 17th century. He's a real Jesuit. I've never read his stuff. It says his radical theories were rejected by even his own order and all modern scholars. So consensus scholarship has ejected Juan Hardouin from the public view, essentially. I'm sure you can find his stuff, but it's apparently rejected by everyone. Giovanni Battista de Rossi is a Catholic, but not a Jesuit. That's the 19th century. Cardinal Angelo Mai, a Vatican employee, not a Jesuit, from the 18th century. I've never heard of these people, and I've never studied their works. So to claim that I'm getting some information from Vatican or the Jesuits or the Freemasons apparently is not legitimate. I'm not doing that. Now here's historians and chronologists with zero ties to the Vatican, Jesuits, Freemasonry. Constantine von Tischendorf. You probably heard of Tischendorf from the 19th century. What's some others I recognize? Erwin Nessel, the Nessel-Aland German Protestants. Okay, their critical edition of the Greek New Testament. This is still the standard today. This is a list of people that have no ties to the Vatican or Jesuits or Freemasons. Kurt Aland, okay, the Nessel-Aland, Kurt Aland, another one, producer of 5,800 plus Greek New Testament manuscripts. Bruce Metzger, I have heard his name a lot. That's this last century. I'm looking for older people. So here's people falsely claimed to be Jesuit, Vatican, Freemasons. Joseph Barber Lightfoot. Lightfoot, I know this name. I have seen translations by this guy or things by this guy. But is this saying he is not? He may be claimed to have been, but he's not. He was an Anglican bishop in Cambridge, okay? Westcott, people, even in the last comment, Westcott and Hort. I'm going to stop here on this list. Isaac Newton is on this list, though. Newton was anti-Trinitarian Anglican. And Albert Einstein, some have mentioned, he was secular Jewish. Now, that's not a good look, but I've never studied any chronology or history from Albert Einstein either. Okay, to me, he's not seen as a historian. People don't look to Einstein for that kind of stuff. So I would just encourage you, if we're going to make broad sweeping statements like that, all the historians and all the chronologists, they're Vatican, they're Jesuits, and they're Freemasons. Now, that's too wrong in too many ways. We can't say stuff like that. We have to be a little more astute in how we approach things. All right, so let's move forward. Let's get off of this silly topic. Let's go to the next topic. Okay. This was a good question. If the camp of the saints in Revelation 20, verse 9, is a physical location on earth, and the reign of the saints in heaven is with Christ, how can Gog and Magog surround them? So to break that down a little more, this person's saying in Revelation 20, the first part is about Satan being bound. Most people will say then, the saints are reigning during the 1,000 years. right? And most people say, oh, that's the millennium. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. And then in verse 9, it says, well, that the camp of the saints is then surrounded by Gog and Magog. All right, so that's the question we're answering. What is really going on in Revelation so we can understand? So let me pull that back up. And let's look at Revelation chapter 20 real quick. I want you to focus here on verse 4. I saw thrones and they sat upon them. Who's they? Up to this point in Revelation, there's been no mention of any saints. There's been no mention of anyone. So we don't know who they is. And it's simply worded this way because of the Greek construction. You have to look at the Greek to understand it. But he says, I saw thrones, and essentially he says people were on them, and judgment was given to these people. Who were these people? He says, I saw the souls of those that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus. Tell me now, did it just say that it was the saints? No. What it just told you, this is the Bible. Okay, now let's put all the other questions about early church fathers and Christian writings away if you want to. You can throw them out. This says, during the binding of Satan, who is on the thrones? The souls, not even the bodies, not the people themselves, but the souls or spirits of those that were beheaded for their witness of Jesus Christ. These are the martyrs. Now, I have to mention at this point a writing by Polycarp because it's such a good example. This is when Polycarp is about to get burned at the stake. And if you don't know the whole story, if I'm not mistaken, they try to burn Polycarp a couple times and it doesn't work because God is protecting Polycarp, okay? But regardless, when he is put at the stake and about to be burned for his testimony of Christ, he says something like, "Oh Lord, that I could be burned for this or die for you and then be on the throne with you in heaven." Okay, something to that effect. In fact, a couple of different times in Polycarp's writings that we have, he talks about that very thing. He wants to win the prize. He wants to run the race worthy and then be killed for his testimony so he can go reign with Christ in heaven. Exactly what this verse is talking about. During the 1,000-year binding of Satan, the word millennium is nowhere here. The word millennial reign is nowhere here. It says Satan is bound for 1,000 years, and the martyrs who die because they're beheaded because of their witness, their spirits go to be with Christ on thrones in heaven. I'm overemphasizing this because we are so loose with the text. We don't pay attention to what it's saying. In fact, I will fault myself because I have said before, the saints do reign with Christ in heaven. But I wasn't paying attention to what it says. The word saints does not appear until verse 9. And that is the verse about the camp of the saints. So while Satan is bound in Tartarus for 1,000 years, the martyrs are given thrones in heaven to reign at that time. This is not Christ's millennial reign. And then further, after the 1,000 years, when Satan is released and loosed in verse 7, he goes out and deceives the nations. He brings Gog and Magog. This is generally in history referring to northern Turkey or the Caucasus mountain area. In fact, I have a whole video on Gog and Magog, and I tend to wonder, based on history, if this is not the Khazarian Empire. It's the exact location of the Khazarian Empire in ancient history, just as a little side note. Go watch my video on Gog and Magog. Maybe you'll agree with me. But this mention in verse 9 of the camp of the saints, Gog and Magog and these armies, they encircle the camp of the saints. is obviously on the earth. It says so. It says they come up upon the breadth of the land, or the earth in the Greek. And they encompass the camp of the saints and the beloved city. It looks bleak for whatever the camp of the saints is. You know, I think typically most Christians have thought that was Jerusalem. Now, I'm not 100% sure that that's Jerusalem, but it seems to be a good candidate. I think there's a couple other candidates as well. But it then says God rains fire down out of heaven. Well, if fire coming down out of heaven, that's definitely on earth, right? So we have established that, yes, the saints in the camp are being attacked by Gog and Magog on earth, but the ones in heaven is not all the saints. It is the martyrs, the ones who were killed for their testimony of Christ. So if we're very careful with the text and we just read it as it is, we realize, it really didn't say that all the saints were in heaven at that time or with Christ on thrones. So that should really put down the notion that the millennial reign was during the binding of Satan. It should also put down the notion of a physical earthly reign of Christ in our past. Because according to this, it's thrones around the throne of God in heaven, and it is the spirits or souls of those that were beheaded for their witness of Christ. It's not their bodies. It's not their human life. It's after they're dead. They're in heaven with him. So if we're careful with this text, I think we will understand it perfectly, and we don't have to, question. We just got to get out of the habit of saying, in verse 4, it's talking about the saints. No, that's not what it says. Not all the saints. Only a very specific group of people that are beheaded for their testimony of Christ. All right. Is there anything else I need to say about that? I don't think so. Yeah. And by the way, just so you're aware, the word saints in Greek, it's hagios, and it only means the holy ones, the holy people. Okay, the holy people, the ones set apart, are essentially in this context Christians. But it's not specifying that they're in the spirit or not in the spirit. But when it says there are some that their soul is sitting on a throne in heaven, yeah, that's spiritual. But when it says the camp of the saints, and it says fire rains down out of heaven on them, that's on earth, okay? All right, the next question is, I think, similar to this one, and so we'll see. If I'm not mistaken, it's very similar. Revelation 27 says, 20 verse 7, says literally, after the 1,000 years of the saints ruling and reigning with Christ, the Satan will be released. So the millennial reign is before he's released. So I'll just go back to what I just said. I won't say it all again, but I think you see now that if we are loose with the text and we apply things that don't apply, then we will say that verse 4 is talking about all the saints and that they're all reigning in heaven, or they're all reigning with God and Christ already. And that's the millennial reign. But it's not what it's saying. It's saying that people who are martyred during the 1,000 years, perhaps, if we want, and that's even a little liberal with the text, but it's apparently the ones that are martyred that get the thrones. It's not all the saints. Okay? And that is obviously in heaven, because that's where John is, and that's where the thrones are. They're around God's throne. They're near that. They're up there. So that should quell all possibilities of an earthly reign of Christ with the saints prior to this time period now, like in our past. So just saying. Okay, let's go on to the next one. One person asked this, and I was really kind of upset that after that video, someone asked this question: when is the millennial reign of Christ then? And I thought to myself, well, I thought I went over that. And I actually did go over that in the video at about, and it's in the description. Let me show it to you. Let me show the description to you. So this is the video. if we go down to the description, and you'll see that at 52:27 is where I do the actual millennial reign of Christ. I talk about it, but I felt it was important to give you the correct background before I did that. So I spent all that time trying to help you see the picture and the why before I did the actual millennial reign of Christ. And now, of course, now in these comments, we're still talking about the millennial reign of Christ. I hope you can see from Revelation 20, if you carefully go through it, how it's not really necessarily talking about that, quote, millennial reign of Christ. I have an entire video, by the way, on the millennial reign of Christ. Okay, it's on my website. It is on the homepage, just a little ways down. You'll see a bunch of these blocks of different videos that I considered, to me, some of my favorites that I've done. And right there, you'll see the millennial reign of the Messiah. It goes over a lot of texts that talk about exactly what I went over in the main video. Okay, so if you want to know the answers, then you can dig in on that in that video. But I think in this short answer session, I probably have answered your question generally. But if you want to see receipts, you want to see sources, that's a great video to go to. So, let me see if there's anything else here. Yeah, so what we need to do then, though, is think about back here on Revelation 20. So if we read here a little further, if you go to Revelation 21, after what? After the 1,000-year binding of Satan, after the Gog-Magog war, after the great white throne judgment, then what happens after all the dead are lifted out of Hades and they stand judgment before God? He casts the wicked into the lake of fire, and then, verse 1 of 21, the new heaven and new earth are now made, essentially. The first heaven and the first earth have been passed away. There's no more sea. And the holy city in verse 2, New Jerusalem, comes down out of heaven. Now, a lot of people think these things are symbolic. They're not real. It's not really going to happen. It's symbolic for other things like the Jewish covenants or the temple or all this stuff. Well, the early Christian evidence is all literal on this. All of it. None of the early Christians thought this was symbolic. None of them. But that aside, if you go to verse 3, what does it say in reference to the new heaven and new earth? Behold, the tabernacle of God is now with men. That's like a mic drop. God wants to live with men. Now, you're going to have people that will say, well, he lives in you. Wait, who lives in me? Christ wants us to abide in him, and Christ says he abides in his Father. But in neither case, and that's a very spiritual reference, it doesn't mean that God, the God creator of the universe, is somehow balled up in your heart. Okay, now that's a very just Western interpretation of these things. There is a time in history, and that's not to say that God doesn't work in your life. I'm just saying that those ideas cannot be symbolically applied wherever you see something in Scripture and just, let's just throw it on because it feels like it feels good there, right? Makes a good sermon. We've had sermons for so long from Christian teachers that make light of these types of writings, and they turn them into something that's totally ethereal and symbolic that doesn't mean anything for anybody. I'm trying to get back to what the earliest Christians believed on these things. And not only does the New Testament literally say God's tabernacle will be with men, this is represented by the Feast of Booths in Jewish ritual, Mosaic ritual practice. That's what that feast was about. Man being with God in the tabernacles of heaven. That's what the booths represent in the Feast of Booths or the Feast of Tabernacles. Everything God did with Israel was a picture of the future. And God will dwell with man, and they will be his people, and God will be with them. He will be with them physically. This isn't allegorical talk. And he will be their God. And what? Then it echoes things out of like prophet Isaiah. Then he will wipe the tears away from their eyes. Has God wiped the tears away from everyone's eyes yet? Is there no more death? Is there no more sorrow and no crying? No. None of those things have come to pass yet, even as prophesied in Isaiah, as they were prophesied to the Jews, so they would understand that at the end they too would partake in this. He says on the throne, behold, I make all things new. It's not allegory, it's not symbol, it's real. It's going to happen. So that's the millennial reign of Christ. After the new heaven and new earth come together, spirituality is made one with mankind, then God and Christ reign, and we are their subjects here on the new earth. It's the most beautiful thing you can ever imagine. But it did not happen back in history, and it wasn't overlapping or congruent with the 1,000-year binding of Satan. One of the things that I teach in that millennial reign video, and you can do this yourself, go search the Bible for millennial reign or millennium. Good luck, because it's not there. Those concepts in general have been imposed on the Bible and then taught to us over centuries, mainly the last couple centuries, by dispensational pastors, no less. So I just caution you, let's go back and take the scriptures at their words. And then my addition to that is that I read the earliest Christians and I see that they consistently affirm these things we're talking about. Consistently. And that's what I try to show in my videos. So that's why I'm doing all this, guys. I really love understanding what God has in store for us. I really, really love it. Now, here's another thing that has been mentioned to me in the chat comments. I wanted to address it. This is going a lot longer than I thought. I hope this is enjoyable for you. If it's not, bow out. It's no big deal. No skin off my nose. I just wanted to try to address common questions so that, we would all have it to refer to. If you're interested, if you're not, it's fine. It doesn't bother me. Like I said, I do this because I love it. All right. The question or the comment was that the Geneva Bible, which I think I mentioned in the original video. I think I mentioned that. The Geneva Bible. Yeah, I think I did because one of the versions of the Geneva Bible that I have read, and I'm going to show you in just 1 second, says that the binding of Satan started in, I think, the 4th century and lasted until the 14th century. And this person was saying that the Geneva Bible notes, actually trying to correct me, really, I guess, saying that they give a binding date of the dragon or Satan at 70 AD on their order of time chart. So I'll say this: I've done I spent quite a bit of time in the Geneva Bibles. I say Bibles because there are many, many editions of the Geneva Bible I found. The two that I studied the most were the Geneva 1599 and the Geneva 1560. Okay? So, and I always, in my brain, I mix numbers up. I'm a little dyslexic, so I always put the wrong one before the other. But yeah, the 1560 being the earlier, the 1599 being quite a bit later. I just had access to both, so I thought I'd read both. I essentially went through the footnotes of Revelation in both editions to compare them. And so I put this on my website, and I will put this in the description so you guys have it as well. But over on my website, I have this page called the Geneva Bible Notes. And as you can see, I do a comparison, and I have on the left column each verse of Revelation chapter 20. And then I'll have the footnotes for the 1560 in the middle and the footnotes for the 1599 version on the far right. Okay? So down here in verse 4, is it verse 4 where they talk about the timing? Let's see. No, I don't think it's verse 4. It's verse 2. He laid a hold upon the dragon, the serpent, the devil, Satan, bound him 1,000 years in Revelation 20, verse 2. Now, in the 1560, it says 1,000 years as the footnote for this verse. It says that is from Christ's nativity until the time of Pope Sylvester II, and that's in 938 to 1003 AD. So that's not 70 AD, as this person mentioned on the order of time chart in one of the versions he was looking at, but it's about the same time period. And so this one says that, and by the way, I just want to mention that these footnotes were written by all sorts of different people. Okay, every edition, the footnotes were written by different people. So that's why they're different, okay? But that's what this 1560 version says, from Christ's birth until Pope Sylvester II. Now, the 1599 version over here says that the first 1,000 years, it started at the 36th year from the Passion of Christ. When the Church of Jesus was being overthrown, Satan tried to invade the Christian church, gather to the Gentiles, and destroy part of her seed. And so that would put it the year 30 AD-ish for Christ's passion, his death and resurrection. It says 36 years from that, so it puts it at about 66 AD, and it pushes it out to Gregory the Seventh in 1073 AD or so. And so that's actually different than I remembered it. Maybe I misspoke in the video, but there are other references from John Fox and from, if I'm not mistaken, Sir Isaac Newton, that both reiterate a later date for the binding of Satan that lasts into the 13th or 14th century. Okay, so that's where I got those references. I may have misspoke. But these two versions of the Geneva say around the time of Christ's birth, or about 70 years later, perhaps around Gregory the Seventh in the 10th or 11th century, or Pope Sylvester in the 10th century. So either or, that's what it says. The problem, I bet, would, the thing is funny to me. I think a lot of Satan's little season people that hold to a physical reign in our past of Christ on the earth, they would reference these writings, the Geneva Bible footnotes. By the way, the footnotes here are written by William Whittingham, if you want to look him up. He was a Reformed anti-papal Christian. And Lawrence Thompson on the 1599 version, he was an aggressive Calvinist and anti-Catholic, okay, Protestants, obviously. But the funny thing is, to me, I bet you if you read all the footnotes for the Geneva Bibles you're talking about, they would conflict with your view of an earthly reign. I bet they, just like this does, talks about Pope Gregory the Seventh. I bet you would find, if you really studied the Geneva Bible's footnotes thoroughly, you would find references to things that have happened in history that would conflict with your view of an earthly reign of Christ in our past during those time periods. Because obviously, they wrote this in 1599 or 1560 or thereabouts. So they obviously were looking back with all that history behind them. They should know, right? They should know. I'm just saying, the work you're quoting here might actually conflict with your viewpoint in other ways you're not aware of. So you got to be careful. I had this comment from someone else. Let's see here. This comment was from someone just as like, this was the first half of their comment. They said, this seems confusing. Is God really the author of confusion? I think, to be frank with you, any prophecy is slightly confusing. even the Christians in the early church were having trouble with some of the prophecies. They had a lot of things locked down, but there were other things they were confused about. I'm mentioning Isaac Newton so much because I recently read his stuff, his chronology and his writings on the book of Revelation. He was one that was saying, he would actually present multiple viewpoints and say, I'm really not sure which I believe, and I don't know. But these are the viewpoints that are out there right now, which is, number one, very honest, but number two, very interesting because he's giving you information about different existing viewpoints in the 14th century or whatever. So that was cool. But anyway, I'm just saying that, throughout history, whenever we're trying to take prophecy and look in the future, it's always slightly confusing, but I think that's the point. It's not, and I said it in the video, in the original video, prophecy is not for us to lock dates down. It's really for us to know kind of what's ahead and be warned as Christians so we're aware. That's the whole reason John wrote the book of Revelation, was so those churches would be aware. And I think to some extent, Christianity in general would be aware. But John wrote these, the letter of Revelation specifically to those churches at that time, so they would understand God's plan for their time and God's plan for Christianity in the future. It doesn't help to know that you're going to have a lot of trial and tribulation and, people like Nero are going to come attack you, and there's the beast working in Rome. He's going to be attacking you and putting Christians like you to death, but then not give the end of the story where God wins over Satan in the end. And that's at the very end, where God casts Satan into the lake of fire. It's after the great white throne judgment. So you have to understand that that's why God would do that. He would give you the book of Revelation at that time to help you then, but also show you he had a plan for history to fix it in the end, because all they had in their lifetimes really to look forward to was persecution. So I don't think God's the author of confusion, and I guess to go just a little further than that, I think that's why I read the early Christian writings, because when I read the early Christian writings, especially with the perspectives that I've laid out for you guys, what I see is consistency. I see people that are very confident about what they believe about Jesus Christ and about even eschatology in a lot of regards. So that's why I like the Christian writings. They affirm the New Testament. They affirm the sayings of Christ. They affirm the prophecies. And so to me, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not to make things more confusing. To be honest, I think most of the confusion really comes for us when we have amassed years and years of teachings from different people, different places, different organizations. Maybe not all of them good, maybe not all of them correct. Or, and so you have to understand that coming with so much built-in perspective, it's always hard. The truth always looks complicated to someone who has only been in darkness all their life. And I'm not saying that y'all are in darkness or I've been in darkness, or I'm just giving that as an example. If all you've ever known is falsehood, then the truth is always going to look like confusion. So, I can't speak to, why it seems so confusing. I don't feel confused by it. Now, I will say I acknowledge that it's a lot. I spent a whole hour going through that overview, and that wasn't even detail. Okay, we didn't touch any detail. I was just slamming through the outline of the entire picture. But again, I just would encourage you. All that stuff is from very clear writings that I do in my other videos. And again, I know it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot for me. But for some reason, God gave me this energy, this desire to do this type of thing. And so right now, as I have the energy that I feel He's given me and the the wherewithal to do it, the breath in my lungs, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this thing. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So I know it feels confusing sometimes, but we all feel confused when we're learning a little bit. It's always hard for, and for some people, I just say that some people learn a little easier than others. Some, like sometimes myself, I noticed in the past, it takes me really coming up against conflict or adversity to be able to break myself free of something I'm holding on to, but I don't even realize it. That's the way I was with some of my preteristic ideas in the past. I never was a full preterist, but I have been in the past. I've called myself a partial preterist. I don't call myself that anymore. But I realized after a long time and studying again some of these writings that helped me break out of it, that I was holding on to some things that no one in the early church believed. And I had to wrestle with, well, if nobody believed it, after, right at the time, right after it all happened in 70 AD, 80, 90, 100 AD, none of those people agreed in preteristic interpretations. None of them. So I had to do the same thing. It was hard for me. At first, I didn't even see it. It was like I was totally blind to the fact that I was holding on to some beliefs about 70 AD that were incompatible with everything the early church was saying. 100% incompatible. So I understand feeling confused from time to time. It's not a problem. We need to just persevere. If we truly love God and we want to get to the truth, we acknowledge confusion. We acknowledge sometimes a little obscurity, and we trust God that in time, if we work and we're diligent, that He will give us the answers we seek. I believe that's what He does. But it's not always on our timetable either. Sometimes it's on His timetable. All right, the next question that I was asked, and it was actually by the same person, asking about the confusion aspect. This person also asked, how do I contend with Matthew 16:28? So let me bring up Matthew 16:28 real fast here. So Matt 16, and we will go to verse 28, which says, Verily I say to you, it's there at the bottom, sorry if I'm in the way. There are some standing there which will not taste of death till they see the Son of Man coming in His kingdom. All right. So the inference I gathered, because the person didn't clarify here, the inference I gathered was that this person was saying, look, Jesus is saying He's coming and they're going to see it, right? Which is a very kind of basic way to look at this verse. I'm not trying to condescend at all, but if we really look hard at this verse, He's saying, some of you, He's looking at, who is He looking at? His disciples in verse 24. He's saying, some of you standing here, some of you disciples, you Peter, James, John, Andrew, you're not going to die until you see me coming in the kingdom, in my kingdom. Okay, now, I want to take you real quick to the Greek, and it's not so I can reinterpret this for you. I just want you to see one thing. This is the verse in Greek on BibleHub.com. Some of you standing here will not taste death until you have seen the Son of Man coming. Erchomenon is the Greek word. You can hopefully see it on the screen there. I'm not trying to play tricks on you. I'm clicking on Strong's Concordance to go to the definition that Strong's gives. I just want you to see the definition of erchomon, or erchomai, the conjugation of this Greek word. This Greek root word, erchomai, is to accompany, to appear, to bring, to come, enter, fall, grow, pass, resort, coming, went, going. Do you see this? I hope you understand this is not just an English word that means literally just coming, okay? This means this means a broad array of things. And if you go down here, the BibleHub.com does such a great job of putting together all these resources. You can see in the New American Standard how they translated this word different times. A lot of times it was his arrival or his coming or entered or expected. Most often it was translated come or coming. But it has a much broader meaning. So when he stands there and Jesus literally says to the disciples, you're not going to die until you see the Son of Man, erchomai, in rulership, in the kingdom. Now that's another interesting word. Basileia is rulership. It's rulership, but it is the word kingdom. It's translated kingdom. But basileus is a ruler, and basileia is a rulership or a kingdom. So it's somewhat congruent, but again, there's always some loss in translation between Greek and English. So all I'm saying is that what we can take from this verse really, as Jesus said, what did he say about the kingdom? What was the kingdom? What did he call it? That's right. He called it the kingdom of heaven about 30 or 40 times in the New Testament. Jesus Christ did. And that's aside from all the other people that called it the kingdom of heaven in the New Testament. I'll look it up real quick. Kingdom of heaven. 32 results in the New Testament. Okay? So 32 results. So, and we could do that across, let's do that. Let's go a little further. Let's go outside the Bible. Let's see of all the writings I've got in this whole corpus, 50 writings. These are early Christian, they're apocryphal, these are Jewish, Dead Sea Scrolls. How many times is the kingdom of heaven mentioned? Wow, okay. 32 plus a bunch here, a bunch there, a bunch there. There's at least 60 or 70 references here across all these writings, all saying the same thing. It's about the kingdom of heaven. It's about the kingdom of heaven. It's about the kingdom of heaven, Eusebius says. Clement of Rome, it's obvious that Clement agrees with Matthew, the kingdom of heaven. So when we see Jesus tell the disciples, some of you will not die till the Son of Man comes in the kingdom of heaven. Is it that he's coming back to earth in the kingdom of heaven? Or is it that he's arriving in the kingdom of heaven? Now, this is even to go even a little deeper. You have to admit that there are some accounts of very amazing things being seen in the heavens in the first century. And I'm not talking about all at 70 AD either. I'm talking about different years during this whole time period. So the question is, was Jesus just telling them he was going to establish his kingdom? Because, by the way, at this point in history, when he said this, he had not established the kingdom yet. According to Peter in Acts chapter 2, Christ took the throne in heaven next to his Father after he ascended to heaven, after he sent back the Holy Spirit, right? The kingdom is established at that time, okay? So again, this is Christ telling these guys, yeah, before you guys die, the kingdom will have come. The kingdom will have come. Okay. So I don't know what to go any further with just that verse. It's hard. But that's the way that looks to me. And again, I would have to take you to history on the first century. If you feel that something in the first century, fulfills the prophecies of Revelation 20, of the great white throne judgment where every human is judged, where every man stands before God, and all the wicked are cast into the lake of fire. Actually, that's the second death, as the text says, and no one has experienced the second death yet. That is an event in history that will occur at the great white throne judgment for the dissolution of the wicked. Okay, it's like that's a thing. It's not just something you can just symbolically apply anywhere in history, because 70 AD didn't give us any historical evidence of those prophetic events. None. Zero. And then right after that, we have a bunch of church people writing writings down about Christ and the gospel, and absolutely zero of them say that those prophecies were fulfilled in 70 AD. So obviously Christ here is talking about his kingdom being established, his heavenly kingdom being established, and that the Son of Man would arrive in that kingdom. And he, as Peter said in Acts 2, he was seated on the throne next to his Father and reigned in heaven. From then forward, forever. Okay, forever. So there's my rant for the day. All right, now I have only one left that I wanted to do. One more. And this is it. This is the last one, but I liked this one so much, and I really wanted to talk about this because it's just a cool question. This person said, if everything is spiritual after judgment, which is one of the things I talked about in my original video, where's the need for a new earth? Why not just heaven? And I thought that was a really good question. And it makes sense. If everything goes to spiritual, why do we need heaven and earth anymore? You know, Revelation 21 verse 1 does say new heaven and new earth. Granted. He says, I'm a short season believer. I do believe we will also be spiritual and physical on the new earth. Yeah, and I agree with that, because 1 Corinthians chapter 15 talks about that when the resurrection occurs, we will be the bodies we had will be taken from the earth. This is what all the Christians said, by the way. The bodies that we had, our dead bodies, our flesh, will be resurrected too and remade and then given back to us. So we will be some weird combination of spiritual and cleansed physical flesh. And it's described perfectly for you in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, if you really want to learn about it. 1 Corinthians 15 is the seminal passage, in my opinion, in the New Testament on the resurrection. It talks all about it. It's Paul justifying the resurrection to people that may or may not believe in it. So yeah, it will be some kind of interesting body that we get after that all occurs. To me, the only way I can explain it to people is to say, I think it might be like Christ's body was. Obviously, some physicality to it after he was resurrected, resurrected from the dead, but obviously very spiritual. He could kind of like appear and disappear. It looks as if in a couple passages he goes through walls, and he also eats, which is just, it's weird, but it's some combination of the two, right? So I would agree with this commenter on that. But I thought his question, very astute, very good question. Why do you need a heaven and an earth if everything goes spiritual after the great white throne judgment? Well, and I commented on that comment. I responded to him, and I just wanted to say that there's a number of texts that I have studied and read now, Christian texts, very old Christian texts, that say things like, and the Bible says the first few. If you'll remember, the Bible says heaven will be rolled back as a scroll, right? It says, even in Revelation, the stars will fall from heaven, right? This kind of sounds like the dissolution, the deconstruction of heaven, doesn't it? All these different things happening to heaven. It says things like, that all this cataclysm not only happens on earth, but it happens in heaven. Heaven is no more. That's what some of these writings that I've been reading that echo these prophecies again and again, they say heaven will now be no more. And they also talk about the great white throne judgment, that at that time, not only mankind, but all the demons in Tartarus, The fallen angels that sinned before the flood, all the angels in heaven, the cherubim, seraphim, they all will stand judgment before God at the great white throne judgment. These writings also say that great white throne judgment isn't like instantaneous. It lasts 7 years on the earth after the fire has cleansed the earth. That great white throne judgment lasts 7 years. So it makes it sound like heaven is kind of being combined, and there's actually one or two texts that I did find that say heaven and earth essentially become one at that time. So I think that the commenter was right on track with this. It's a really good point, and it's logical, but that's why it is congruent with what we read in the Christian writings. It sounds like that was what God had in store too. He didn't need a separation between heaven and earth anymore. So when the change happens and the new heaven and earth is made, it really is all one. It's all together. And again, it's another one of these things. It's so beautiful to think about and understand, that holy God is going to have to cleanse everything and then judge everything so that it's holy, so that he can come and live with man. As Revelation 21:2 says, or 3, verse 3 and 21, that God will now tabernacle with men. He wants to live with men, with you and with me. And that's the way he has to do it, because as you know, many times in the scripture, God is holy. He's holy. The most high God who has never... He is so far away from sin and corruption that he has to cleanse the earth before he sets up shop here. Before he can live with mankind, mankind has to be cleansed. That's why the judgment has to occur. That's why the wicked have to be cast in to the lake of fire, along with Satan and the beast and the false prophet. That's just what has to happen. God is too holy. He cannot commune with corrupt man side by side without something happening. And he's got to make it so that we can all be together in the end. That's his plan for us. It's so beautiful. And that's again what he prophesied to the Jews far before the time of Christ. He was telling them this too through their prophets. After they had given themselves to idols and pagan idol worship, and then he cast them out by allowing the Babylonians to come and take over the temple and destroy it the first time, and they were deported to Babylon. Then he sends his prophets to them, telling them, look, in the end I will wipe all your tears away. I will save you in the end. And he was talking about exactly what we're talking about. He wants to live with you, and he wants to live with me. It's not, it's the kind of thing, when you realize the power of it, you realize how powerful what God has done is and what he's going to do. I'm telling you, man, it all fits. The puzzle fits. You'll never go back when you realize what he has planned. You'll never go back. Trust me. But again, I encourage you through all this. I encourage you. It's not easy. Like some of you said, it gets confusing at times. I have spent tons of time reading these writings to understand these things. Tons of time. A lot of them I have in my Bible Scribe app that I have online. And I use this. I have some people on my channel that use this with me to read these writings, to cross-reference them, to see it. But I'm just saying, it's a lot of work, but it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding to see it all match up. And the only way I can communicate that is by trying to do this, is by coming online and trying to show you one little thing at a time so that you understand this piece and then that piece and then the next one and the next one. That's the only way I can do it, because I feel like I feel like because of what I've read, the blinders are off and I see it now. I feel like I see it. And I just am trying my best to help people see what I see. But it's usually I'm trying usually to help people that haven't done the research. So that's why it's hard. That's why it's hard. So I would encourage you, if there's any one of these areas you're super interested in, dig into it. Really research it for yourself. Not for me. Don't listen to me. Get ideas from me sometimes, but do it yourself. I don't care if today I don't care if you hate me and you go off and you do your own research. You get mad at me, you hate me, you go do your own research. And when you research the same things I have, I'm betting you might come back and say, man, what you said was in there. Because that's how I felt when I found it first. When I first found all this stuff and started reading through, writing after writing, and I'm like, why did everyone always tell me I shouldn't read these early church writings? Why did people tell me that it was the Vatican and the Jesuits putting these together? Because it's not. Why did people tell me what they thought was in these writings when they didn't even know? That's what kills me, is I've been told things by people in the past about some of these Christian writings that they said was true, and when I read the writings, I realized they weren't true at all. Now, I don't know why that happens in Christianity. Why do people do that? I'm telling you, you can hear what I'm saying because I've read a lot of it. And when you get something in your, you hear from me that you either don't agree with or that you're interested in, please dig in yourself. Don't take my word and don't take anyone else's word online for it. You dig into it, you find it out, and then you come on my channel if you don't mind and post in the comments the references for what you found. I'll say that even though in my original video on the Satan's Little Season, I asked everyone, please put references in your comments. Looks to me, based on what I've seen in the comments, that only about 1 out of every 10 or 15 comments gave me any kind of reference, let alone a very specific one, which is a little disappointing, as I look through these comments. And I will say I really appreciate those of you that just you at least take time to encourage me. It really means so much. It really means so much to hear the encouragement. Even if you're taking issue with something I said, just to hear some encouragement sometimes, I'll say it's quite rare online to hear encouragement. Most people that comment simply do it because they have something they want to argue about. So I'll just say, I don't mind trying to debate topics, but I love having the encouragement. It's so good for me. Thank you for those blessings. But that being said, I think I've wasted enough time, an hour and a half, man, too long. But I think in general, the things we talked about were very important. Again, I hope if you stayed through the whole thing and listened to all this, you got a lot out of it. These are common questions that people bring up, but it's hard when in the comments I'll get like 5 or 10 different people asking the same question, and I can't respond in a way that all of them see it at once. That's why I did this. So hopefully it's been helpful and fun for you guys. Thank you so much for your time and your attention, and I just pray that God blesses you in your research the way that I feel He's blessed me. God bless you. Take care.